Welcome to Circuosity. I'm your host, Jim Strader-Sasser. Circuosity is a podcast for considering and becoming more curious about our lives. We investigate tools like our character strengths, the circle way, and the way of love to ascertain how we might become more fully human. Today's podcast is about courage and living more courageously. So I invite you to join in as we begin. Eckhart Tolle reminds us that it is in our ability to be gracious for the present moment that our spiritual awakening most happens. So in terms of being thankful for my life, I want to begin by thanking courageous people who have inspired me this week. First, I want to thank the creators of Insight Timer and their teaching staff, and most especially Glenda Cedarleaf, who did a beautiful meditation on morning courage. So I'm thankful for Glenda and Insight Timer. I'm also very grateful for the Panda Planning people and for the VIA Character Strength Panda Planner that I use, and especially to Michael Leip, who created Panda Planner some years ago. And if you want to read a courageous story, read about his life. And lastly, I want to thank my friends who inspire me on a daily basis. And this week I had a couple of conversations with a new friend named David, who is about the business of giving birth to a new spiritual community here in the local area. And so I'm thankful for David and for his wisdom and for his courage to undertake bringing something new into being. Glenda began her meditation that I mentioned earlier with a great quote from E. Cummings, and I'd like to borrow that quote from her and from Cummings. Cummings wrote, "It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are." That is so very true. I have many character strengths, but I don't consider courage to be one of them. One of my key character strengths, however, is curiosity or a love of learning. So I'd like to invite us to spend some time thinking about how to become more courageous. And it seems to me that there are four elements, or at least four elements, that I'm observing and learning about courage. The first is, to be courageous is to have a purpose for life, to define, examine, and constantly seek to live into the purpose that we possess as a human being. We need to also consider who is going with us on the journey, who is coming along, who has God or the divine planted by our sides to nurture our seeds of our life, and then what is driving us to accomplish this task, this purpose, this life? What's pushing us? What is our yearning for it? And coincidentally, what is inhibiting us? Or what is the resistance that is pushing up against that we actually need in order to accomplish the purpose that we have? And how do we develop a process for considering all of these factors so that we indeed can become the human being, the courageous, wholehearted person that we are? There are at least 3 great truths that we should consider and remember and live into. The potential for wholeness or transformation or transcendence is present in every one of us. Every human being, every creature, in fact, has the capacity for creating greater wholeness and transcendence. Another is that this is true if we come to understand that in the human condition, we are never separate from our source, from the universe, or from the divine's love and presence. To consider ourselves as being separate and individual dissuades us from understanding that indeed we are called to wholeness and interdependence. And because of these 2 truths, another truth is that a disciplined practice is essential to the spiritual life. And it's not because of one's efforts that we become more whole and more courageous, but it is the experience of our oneness with reality and with life as it unfolds that leads to greater courage. We all have a unique shard of life, and so it is how we consider this truth, that we are here for a reason, that we belong on this planet to bring something into being, whether you're a theist or not, in terms of understanding the universe and living into it while you are alive as a mortal. You must believe that the divine is unknowingly closer to all of us than we can imagine. We are ever connected to the source of our lives, just as that same source is working out its purpose through us. In the Christian tradition, Jesus teaches us that our deepest griefs and our deepest treasures cohabitate and nurture our life's purpose. Where our treasure is, where our sacrifice is, there will our lives really be born and recreated. The Circle Way informs us that the essence of our conversations with ourselves and other people must be about listening and speaking in honest and attentive ways. So if we believe that we are connected to the universe, to ourselves, and to one another, we must speak about these things and contemplate these things honestly and truthfully. We should not be dissuaded or deterred by our doubts or by our previous experiences or about our fears of the unknown. Rather, we must acknowledge them along with our sufferings and continue to press on towards the goal of being courageously and becoming who we are. Let me offer 2 focal points for undertaking the pilgrimage of courage. Those points are resolve and recreation. Resolve is not the same as wishing or hoping. Resolving understands that there are barriers out there to our progress, and we must accept them and overcome them and or embrace them. Society's comforts for those of us who live generally leisurely lives inhibit us from undertaking the pilgrimage towards our soul's deepest desires. If we are going to be courageous, we must be morally and intellectually astute and prepared to undertake the trip. Life's responsibilities, along with our ego's yearning for worldly success, also offer resistance. You know, it's an interesting world where you can buy a car from the comfort of your couch. And so that is a leisure, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a courageous endeavor. And it's even harder when we start to think about undertaking work that will change the world and change our lives. Procrastination based upon previous experiences and errors is another reason for not embarking upon the spiritual and practical quest. I'm a great procrastinator. My inner critic is constantly telling me that it's not worth it to do the work, or that my previous failures in trying to bring something into being will happen once again. And so it's a lot easier for me to sit on the couch and watch baseball and drink a glass of rosé than it is to do something that my heart really yearns to do. Thus, resolve is much more than wishing something to be true. Resolve requires much more of us than we can muster under normal conditions. It requires the other elements of the pilgrimage that we must have in order to be successful. This leads to recreating ourselves constantly as we engage in our life's work. Recreation happens through a step-by-step maturing process. There are things that we must do in order to get to the other things that we must do. There is the Buddhist teaching of when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. If we pass one hurdle or pass one turn in the labyrinth of our lives, then we become more prepared to face the next one. The sacred relationships that we have with ourselves, the divine, and our beloved family and friends, therefore equip us to accept each day's regenerative endeavors. When Dave comes up and says, "Hey, I'd like to talk with you about this community that I'm trying to develop," I must be prepared to answer questions as best I can for him, and I must be able to listen to him and listen to the wisdom that he has as he considers midwifing this process. Together, through a sacred contract with one another, we can perhaps do some of the work that God is giving us to do. Courageous human beings ritualistically contemplate what they are learning and what experimental adaptations they are willing to try. This step is so hard, and yet it is so easy. If we were just to take the time each and every day, in the beginning of the day, and at the middle of the day, and at the end of the day, to examine what it is that we are learning and what we are trying to accomplish, we will become increasingly courageous as we go. Brene Brown writes, "To love ourselves and support each other in the process of becoming real is perhaps the greatest single act of daring greatly." Wholehearted self and shared love is the most observable means of becoming courageous. The first step in that process is to understand your purpose. Why are you on this planet today? What gifts do you have that you've not fully developed? What do you have to offer the world that no one else is offering or can offer in the same way you can and you should? What's your plan? What's your prayer and contemplation to undertake this work and this joy? Do you have a sobering mechanism for the moments when you're swept away by competing priorities, distractions, and disgust? Sobering means to stop, observe, breathe, expand, and respond. Who's going with you? There's a Pat Metheny song that I love so much because it unfolds itself over about 6 or 7 minutes, entitled, "Are You Going With Me?" I love that theme because I know I'm not traveling alone on my pilgrimage. God has given me friends and family members and experiences and ancestors and people I haven't even met yet who are going with me. God, in my experience, is offering me all kinds of special moments that are transcendent each and every day if I will just be open with them. Some of these sacred contracts are very, very long, and some of them are not as long. And it is in these covenanted relationships that transformational qualities happen. What gifts are my friends sharing with me, and what am I sharing with them? And if these things are true, how can we prevent ourselves from becoming isolated or afraid or scared or disengaged when life seems so hard? There are driving forces and restraining forces. So all resolved change requires that the driving factors must add up more than the resisting forces. If this is not true, if the reasons for doing the pilgrimage do not outweigh the reasons for not accomplishing it, then it is time to step back and reconsider when and how we should go and why. Human beings are very reluctant to take huge risks, so it may be wise to begin with something smaller and grow from there, and to develop a plan that's a bit more concrete and more reasonable to start the journey. If you truly wish to become really who you are, these are some of the steps that you must devote yourselves to pray about, do on a daily basis, contemplate with yourself and in your circles, and adapt as life's unforeseeable and uncontrollable occurrences happen. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. You and I are the divine's beloved children. Each of us and all of us possess a unique spark and essence of the divine. It's uniquely ours and cannot be extinguished. It is connected to the source and to one another. Because of this, we must develop a mature willingness to embrace pain and happiness both in loving and enduring ways. Becoming more fully present to each moment and believing, not just thinking, but believing in life's wholeness and love is fundamental. And how you and I contemplate and act upon these courageous truths shapes our journey into a deeper and more authentic realization of ourselves. Through this process, we will create a kinder and healthier and more loving world, one moment, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for following the podcast. You can continue to follow us on Podbean, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you believe that these podcasts are valuable and worthwhile, please share them with at least one friend and ask them to join in our journey. Until we chat again, the peace of God which passes all understanding keep your hearts and minds and souls and bodies in the knowledge and love of God, and the blessing of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Giver of life, be with you today and remain with you always and forever. Thanks again, and goodbye.